The Central Club.
Well, what's going on, people? Welcome to the Central Club. This episode is brought to you by Re-Inspire Printing, Ape Stride, and the City Arms. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the club, and hit the bell button to be notified of future content. We're still here in Kingston. Last podcast of the day. We're going to finish it in tip-top fashion. This podcast has, you know what? It's funny how podcasts come about. You know, some people will email, some people are, get recommendations and, send out like private messages or whatnot. But sometimes you actually get like personal requests by people you know. And this one is that. And the person who requested this to me, I want to say a big, big shout out to you, Alex. We've grew up and we've got, from the same area and stuff. And when you told me about this story, I knew I had to get this person on. And although I didn't know too much about this person, from the brief interaction I've had with him now and what I've seen, I am so glad that we've got this to actually happen, because this story is unbelievable. And you've been fighting battles on all fronts, really, in your life. And I'm just really, really happy to finish off the day with a former Royal Marine. He got a book out. It's called No Surrender, Every Day is a Battle. And the person who's written this book is Rian Illett. Rian Illett, yeah? Illett?
That's it, mate, yeah.
Welcome on, mate. Thank you for
very
coming.
much for having me.
No worries. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, you.
Yeah, good. Really good, actually. We once or twice a year we'll pop up to Kingston, and I asked you you said you was flying past Cardiff and you could come down, but just it didn't work out. And we said, I'm in Kingston tomorrow, and he went, I'll be there. I was like, fair play, this guy don't mess about at all, does he? Could you do me one favour before we start? If you just put the mic just a little bit closer to your face, that's it.
Like that?
Don't worry, your posture looks alright. No, thank you for coming. Your story is wild. I just want to say maybe the subtitle for people to get a grasp of what this is. It says fighting demons, jihadis, and terminal cancer. Are you still fighting them?
Still fighting. Every day's a battle. But you can't give up the fight. You got to keep carrying on. The day you give up is the day that you will sink further down in the mental health problems or poor health in my case. So we like to remain positive and fight forward. Yeah.
And if there's, one impression I've got from you, it is pure positivity. To the point of like, it's infectious, and hopefully this podcast and other things that you do, which no doubt I'm sure you will be able to infect others to feel the same way. And that's what it's all about, Ree. Yeah. So what we do with most of our guests really is kind of take it back from the beginning, but, on strict time and how extensive this story is, we can go on for hours. But if you just want to give us a brief backstory of where you were from and maybe just a little bit about your childhood, which got you to the point of joining the Royal Marines.
So I wasn't the greatest of teenagers. I was obviously involved in bits of skullduggery growing up, as I'm sure most lads were back then. And I used to drink in a pub underage in Guildford. And I remember having a altercation with someone in this pub one night, and there used to be a jock sat in the corner who used to always mind his own business and just sit there. Lovely fella. I remember he pulled me aside and he went, if you think you're so hard, why don't you join the Marines or the Paras? I was like, never heard of either of them. And then I started a college course a couple of weeks later, and my college lecturer was a former Royal Marine. And still, I didn't really have any guidance in life or know what I wanted to do. So he mentioned the Marines. So I was like, I've heard about these Marines now, like twice in the last couple of months. So I went home and said to my mum and dad, I'm going to join the Royal Marine Commandos. And they both laughed at me. And I was like, well, that's it now. I 100% will be one of them. And from there, I joined the Royal Marines in 2006 at 18 years old and had a 15-year career before I was medically discharged.
Wow. Before you done that then, so what kind of character was you? Was you a bit of a scrapper then? Was you maybe getting into trouble and stuff? Or?
Yeah, I'd get into trouble with my friends and that, like a lot of people do, but I wasn't a bully or anything like that. I was just a lad. Loved football and was the same as everyone else, really.
Yeah. And when I look at the tours you've done and where you've been, would you put that down to luck, or would you put that down that you're here now? Would you put it down to luck because you've been to some dangerous places, you've been in some dangerous situations, you've lost a lot of friends clearly. Would you put that down to luck, or would you put that down to just being a good soldier?
You're always going to have the element of luck, but I was in the worst places with the right people, and I think a lot of me still being here and other people being here is down to the professionalism of the people I was lucky to work alongside.
Yeah, and for people who probably don't know how to get into the army and stuff, was it a simple, straightforward kind of enrollment list?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how it would be now because obviously I joined 17 years ago. But it was go into the careers office, speak to someone, go through some interviews and some testing. Then you'd be invited down to the Commando Training Centre in Exeter for a potential Royal Marines course, which would last 5 days. You'd get scored on each activity or event. And then at the end of that, they'd tell you whether you were successful or not. And then if you were successful, you'd move on to the next phase, which was 8 months of commando training.
And was you successful first time?
I was successful first time on the potential Royal Marines course. But I spent an extra 2 months in training because I was built like I had a week to live and wasn't too good at climbing ropes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I ended up doing 11 months in training and then passed out and went to 40 Commando.
And also for people, and probably myself as well, actually, Royal Marines, like, we hear all sorts, SAS, British Army, Fusion. Who are the Royal Marines? What's their backstory?
So the Royal Marines, they're the only soldiers, Marines obviously, that can fight in every quarter of the world and deploy in any means. So the Marines, we do Arctic warfare, which is one of our specialities, jungle, mountain, desert, and then we can insert via amphibious landings, air if you're a military parachutist, or just on land.
So would you say you're the nitty gritty who's like kind of pushed everywhere?
Yeah, definitely. I think the way to look at the British military, obviously you have the Special Forces group that do what they do. And then you've got the Marines and the Parachute Regiment that are more sort of like your roughy, tufty shock troops, same as the infantry and the army. And then obviously you have all the enablers that it's kind of like a puzzle that puts everything together for that one main battle effort.
Yeah, so like the Navy, the
RAF.
Yeah. And then, so they all do come together. It's not like you're all separate. Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for clearing that up, because sometimes I do get confused with it. Like, if you're not in the know about the military kind of hierarchy, then you could be saying stuff and people be like, yeah, like, I've heard of that, but I'm not too sure what that is. So when you went into it, was you someone who like didn't have fear, or have you got to be fearless to go into the Royal Marines? Like,
I think there's a certain element of commando training certainly can shape part of you. I think you just need to have that. When I joined, the slogan was 99.99% need not apply. And I was like, well, I want to be that small statistic that will be one of them. So that was kind of a lot of people that I joined with. We had the same mindset of, no matter what happens, I want to be in that 0.01%. And that kind of drove people forward, and then training had shaped you. And then once you got to a commando unit and your career actually started, the situations and the experiences you had would all add to your character of what type of Marine you would be. Yeah.
And of course, during the time you were enrolling, we are actually at war. Like, the British are deployed in some hairy situations. And was that something that was on your radar straight away going into that?
Yeah, I mean, going through Lympston, the Commando Training Centre at the time, there was a good amount of like corporals and sergeants from 4.2 and 4.5 Commando that had come back from Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of not rammed down your throat, but it was, listen, you's lot are successful here, you're going to go to Afghanistan. So it was always,
there's no bullshit.
You knew what the end state was.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not exactly like, going down the old fucking, what's it called? like Boy Scouts now, like, and you've just got the uniform on for the sake of it. You're going to war.
Yeah, there was a purpose at the end of it.
Yeah. And how long does that process take for until you go to a war zone?
So yeah, at the end of commando training, if you're successful, you can put in for like your preference of what commando unit you'd like to go to. You won't always get it, depending on manning, but you can certainly have a choice. And if you get your choice, depending where the Marines sit with deploying, because 40 Commando would always work independently, and 4-2 and 4-5 Commando would always work as part of 3 Commando Brigade. And it's to have a commando unit in the UK constantly for readiness. So 40 Commando was due to go to Afghanistan. So we got told, don't bother putting it because you won't get it because they're fully manned about to go. But a couple of us did anyway because that's where we wanted to be based, and we got it. So, for example, with myself, I passed out, and 6 weeks later was in Helmand Province in Afghanistan. But then some of my friends that went to 4-2 or 4-5, they did the following year's tour. So it really depends what unit you went to
so
as to how quick you went out the door. Yeah, so it 6 weeks.
Wow.
Obviously, sometimes battle casualty replacements, they could be 4 weeks out of training, or you'd have lads that did the pre-deployment training and deployed a year later.
I suppose the difference with the army now compared to, well, it probably evens out actually, because I was going to say, World War II, it's mandatory. We'll all go into war. So you probably get people there who are not really wanting to go to war. Yeah. So surely the soldiers we have who are volunteering to go to war off their own back must be the best of the best. But then I was thinking maybe it might balance out, because if you go into war and you don't want to, you're fighting for it, like you have to go to war. Would you agree with that, or would you,
Certainly in the troops and the units that I've been a part of, everyone's been on the same wavelength of this is happening, we're doing it together. I'm sure there's stories out there where people have melted and not wanted to go because of what's coming back from theatre, but I've never come across it personally.
Oh, and if say like you was out on a tour and like there's one or two people in there who are back ending it, how would you kind of like support that person? Because I always hear, which is of course the same in sports or wherever, you're in it together, and if you fucking ain't 100%, you're fucking risking my fucking life here. So
yeah, there is an element of that, but you just got to get around them. You know what I mean? I've not really seen too much of that. Obviously, some people can have a moment where they're like rabbits and headlights, but they quickly shake out of it. But you just got to get round them people, and like you said, we're all one team, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
One fails, we all fail. But I've never been in a situation where it's gone that wrong, where you're like, you know what I mean? Right, fuck him off.
Yeah, he's more dangerous to us than... Yeah, I understand. So, your first tour, you went to Helmand Province on the first tour, yeah?
Yeah, I went to a place called Kajaki in the North Helmand Province, which was a hydroelectric dam that British forces had taken off the Taliban, and then the Taliban wanted back, so that was quite a good baptism by fire. And
what, you're talking like you're landing and what, you're on gunfight missions straight away, or?
I think I landed in Kajaki, was obviously taken into the forward operating base, met the lads, and then 2 days later we was out on the ground, my first ever patrol, and it was quite a big firefight, obviously to and fro in with rockets, rounds, machine guns, mortars, grenade launchers. So it was quite a spectacular thing to be involved in so soon after passing out of training. Because 6 weeks prior, I was still a recruit at the Commando Training Centre. And then 6 weeks later, I'm a Royal Marine with 40 Commando, Charlie Company, fighting in the North Helmand.
And is it possible to paint a picture or kind of describe, what it's like fighting the enemy? Because whenever you see these photos or videos or... the movies are different, but it's hard to kind of identify where your enemy is, especially in Afghanistan. It
is. But if you've got things like anti-tank lads had the command launch unit for the Javelin anti-tank missile, which picks up on heat, they'd be able to see through that. Obviously, you've got optics that you can see through. So if a camera doesn't pick something up, It doesn't mean the lads aren't seeing it with like the snipers with their scopes. You'd have like an ACOG on your rifle that's got ×4 magnification. So it's a lot easier to see when you have optics than just what some of the helmet camera footage shows.
And the vibe of maybe of death and how kind of intense it was over there. Was you introduced to that as well very quickly? Was it were the lads like saying, "Listen, this ain't a joke," or was you seeing it yourself? Or
well, there was none of that. I mean, there was so early on into my career on that tour, I witnessed some of my section hit an improvised explosive device. Thankfully, everyone lived, but that was my first exposure of seeing an amputee and obviously people getting hurt by acts of violence from the enemy. So early on seeing that was a bit like, oh, this is real. But at the same time, looking around the people I was with, I was comfortable with who I was with. Like, I trusted these people. I was like, well, if I'm having a bad day, all right, it's coming, but these people will get me out of this.
Yeah, that's a very warm feeling in such a harsh, cold environment, I suppose, isn't it?
And that's key, is having faith in the lads around you.
Yeah. What that first tour that you went on, how old was you, sorry, again?
19.
You was 19. And in that first tour, did you know that this is what you wanted to do 100%. For the next? Or was you like, I'm going to do one tour and go?
No. I did that first tour and I was like, I need this more.
Yeah?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Not to the point of being a warmonger where I didn't care, but it was just like, I've trained for 8 months in commando training. Obviously, I did a couple of extra months because I couldn't climb ropes. And it was like, I've gone through all of that effort to become a Raw Marine. I've gone on operations. That's all I want to do now. I don't want to go backwards. I just want to keep doing operations.
Yeah. No, that, again, like that, it must have been like, this is where I belong now, like kind of feeling, innit, really?
And it's probably like a sports person who trains like a football team. They train all week for a game on a Saturday. Well, we've trained, and then we go on operations. That's the end state, is doing it live.
Do you, as a soldier, do you have, is it part of your curriculum, let's say, do you have to know everything about what's going on, like the geopolitics to it maybe, everything about what's going on in that war? Or is it just one of those things where, right, this is your mission, and just crack on with it, and you don't really know anything about what you're fighting?
I think anyone who's professional will read up on things, but also you will get like intelligence briefs. So you'll have an understanding of what's going on and what the bigger picture is.
You will see that bigger picture.
Yeah, of course. But then ultimately, in my opinion, because I was so close to the people that I'd formed these bonds with, I was going no matter what to be with them.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying. And for people, I just want to put this out there, yeah? So for people who don't know what war is like, can you describe that in any words?
Chaos. Life can turn upside down in a split second. 1 minute everything's all fine and people are sat there having a laugh in their forward operating bases or patrol bases, and next minute you've got a 360-degree ambush or grenades being thrown over your wall, and you just got to kick straight back into autopilot and react to what's in front of you. But it's the same as going on patrol. 1 minute you're walking along and you're just observing your arcs, and then the next minute all of a sudden you're in an ambush, and yet again you've got to go into your training and the skills and professionalism that you have to do the right thing at the right time.
And on that first tour, did you pick up, these firsts? Did these all happen?
Yeah, they all. Yeah, not the grenades over the walls or that, but getting rocketed in our forward operating base, and there was a lot of times that we'd go on the ground and we'd end up in enemy contact with the Taliban.
Did you on that first tour? Did you see any good? I don't say any good, but. Yeah, was there any good you done in that first tour? Like yourself, could you say, going back, say you come back from your first tour, do you know what? I done some good there. Like I know what I've done here. Maybe on a personal level, or
I think I was that high on the adrenaline of finally getting to where I wanted to be. I weren't really thinking about that side of things, but we came home from there giving the locals around that hydroelectric dam a good buffer zone that the Taliban wouldn't encroach on because we were there. So we did good in that respect, but also at the same time, a lot of people left the area because of the conflict that was going on.
That hydroelectric dam, is that made was that made like by, I don't know, their government before, is it?
I believe it was built by the Americans.
Really?
I believe.
So it was pretty new then.
I don't think it was new, but what it did is the reservoir, it fed water all through Helmand, which powered their electricity, which meant the Taliban could tax everyone on the electricity that was produced by that dam.
Right, I see.
That's 50-50 as well, because you get people that are smile and wave at you, and you'd ask them, literally, like, where's the Taliban? No Taliban. Where's the bombs? No bombs. And then you get half hour down the road and all of a sudden one of your mates has trod on a pressure plate IED and you're like, well, how come you live here every day and you don't tread on that? And I've just asked you where they are. You've said they're not here, but all of a sudden we've hit one. So it's a bit of, there's definitely sympathisers amongst the local population. Obviously there's some good, but you can't take it as everyone's on your side.
And are these the missions you're doing then? Is it the same, like, go out and just sweep the area?
We
for
have
bombs?
to. You've got to dominate the ground to deny enemy freedom of movement.
So, communication with the locals is on your free will, in the sense of me and you come interaction now, like, and it's that free. Is it where you just
we'd always try and help them. Yeah, do you need anything? Can we help you? Do your kids need our medic to look at you? You know what I mean? Because you've got to do the support and influence. You've got to try and win the locals over for the bigger picture, because there's no point in you do something wrong towards the locals, for example, then, well, you've just pushed them the side with the enemy. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think that's what. Well, maybe we'll talk a bit more about the bigger picture at the end of it, maybe like on some evaluation. But yeah, the Taliban now surely are those kids that were there.
Yeah, of course. Especially when you were there for 20 years.
Well, does it frustrate you? Like, does it feel like a waste of time, or was it just a hell of a good time? Was it,
I've got no regrets, and I enjoyed everything I did in the 18 months that I was in Afghanistan. But it was a travesty to see the way that we exfilled out the country. That was a complete joke. But obviously.
And the tour is 6 months, is it?
Yeah, 6 or 7.
Anything memorable from that first tour that you look back on?
Just the baptism to fire. First ever time on the ground, and was in a massive firefight, and was like, this is happening.
Did you take any bodies on that first tour?
Not that time. No, not that time.
But you got to pop it off, and
I got quite a few rounds down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just reacting to enemy fire.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
So after the first tour, you went into the anti-tank, yeah? Is that like a course, is it? Or
yeah,
is
so you can, within the Marines, because we pride ourselves on being a self-sustained corps.
Doing
we have anti-tankers, mortarmen, air defence, assault engineers, drivers, chef. We have everything to keep it. So anyone, so we can support ourselves, self-sufficient. And I put in to go onto an anti-tank course. And there was a bit of a waiting list at the time. But luckily, I think because I had a good first tour, I ended up on an anti-tank course sort of like a year into my career, which was quite good going at the time. Yeah. I went to 4-2 Commando after I qualified as an anti-tanker.
What was that? Was you buzzing with that? Like, was that like another?
Yeah, because that's what I wanted to do. So,
bow, like,
when I obviously went to Afghanistan, obviously young 19-year-old lad, and you're like this is off the chart. What's going on?
Have you been abroad before this?
Only on holiday.
Yeah, but you did go abroad. Like,
yeah. But I hadn't gone abroad where people are firing 107mm rockets at you and things like that. You know what I mean?
No, but I was, I'm just thinking like, imagine never going abroad and then you do, and it's the fucking Afghanistan on the fucking war zone,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you've just said.
But it was just a whole different world. And I used to look at the anti-tank lads, and they had all the biggest guns and the biggest missiles, and they used to drive around in the Wimics. You would have seen them. It's like the basically the weapon platform. You'll have a general purpose machine gun in the passenger seat, the commander's seat, obviously a driver, and then a bloke on top with a massive 50 cal or a grenade machine gun. And I used to look at them doing bits, and I was just like, that's where I want to be.
Yeah.
So then when I got to be an anti-tanker, I was like, yeah, I'm happy with this.
Dog's bollocks.
Yeah. We're happy with that.
So then the next tour you could go on, you was qualified to just rock up in one of them.
Yeah, but the following 2 tours I did after that,
You went to Iraq?
Yeah, that was it. So I went to southern Iraq twice, but Iraq wasn't, my Iraqs were not as kinetic as obviously people that did the invasion on Telic 1 and things like that.
Yeah.
So my Iraqs, I've not really got much to write home about, but it was good to see a different side of the Corps, doing sort of like a more amphibious role, going out on speedboats and that.
Sorry, obviously Americans were out there as well. Did you have any contact with the Americans out there?
Yes, we had some American Marines on our base as well.
At both the Afghan tour and the
Not
Iraq?
the first Afghan tour, the 2 Iraqs I did.
Yeah. What's the difference then? Can you tell me the difference in Iraq and Afghan? As maybe the people and the war itself.
Iraq's just more westernized.
Really?
More concrete, more tarmac.
Yeah.
More developed.
Saddam.
Yeah. Whereas Afghanistan's more mud huts and irrigation ditches and dirt tracks, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Of what I saw from both countries.
And you never had no urban warfare then in Iraq then, no?
No, other people did, but I personally didn't.
Did you kick yourself a bit of that, like?
Not really, because I already had the taste of that.
In Afghan?
I'd already done an Afghan before I went to Iraq. So for me, I was already at the highest point of I've done some scrapping. Like I've been on operations and what I wanted to do as a Royal Marines commando.
Yeah.
So I did them 2 Iraqs, but then I went back to 40 commando to go back to Afghanistan again.
So you went from the 2 Iraq tours. You didn't see much action there then. So at this stage, still haven't took a body then. Probably didn't see anything as much action as you did in Afghanistan. And then you went back to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
What was that experience like that time round?
So that one was a bit of a dirtier tour. It was pretty horrific, to be fair. The whole of 40 Commando was in the Sangin Valley. Well, to start with, we had a company up in Kajaki, but by the end of it, everyone was in the Sangin Valley, which was known as like one of the main Taliban strongholds of Afghanistan. And it had turned into sort of like a minefield, really, where there were so many IEDs everywhere. So we took quite a few casualties. Unfortunately, the unit took 1 in 4 life-changing casualties, from obviously lads paying the ultimate sacrifice to losing limbs and stuff like that. But it was regular on that. Like, because we was in patrol bases holding ground, we'd try and get out to dominate, but then we'd hit a device, take casualties, have to withdraw back to the PBs or the FOBs, and then go again, hit more devices. So it was a stressful 7 months, and there wasn't anyone part of that 40 Commando battle group that had an easy day. Like, everyone was up against it. I remember coming home on R&R, and unfortunately one of my friends had just been killed. I didn't know. I was told at Camp Bastion. I'd only seen him 2 days previously because he was in a different company to me. I'd done my first Afghan with him. Seen him on this joint operation where a couple of the companies merged together in the southern green zone of Sangin. Obviously, really good to see some of your friends that you haven't seen for months. Hello, mate, how are you, and all that. And then I went to fly home on R&R. So I was just chilling out at Camp Bastion in like the coffee shop that they had there. And someone come over and broke the news to me that unfortunately he'd died in an IED strike, which I was like, another friend gone. Because I lost a couple of close friends on that tour. And when I went to the funeral on R&R, I went as a sign of respect, I drove all the way to 40 Commando to get my like blues, which is like our like number one uniform where you wear your medals and all of that stuff. And because of all our blues they were all hung up on racks in like our company offices in case we passed away. They knew where people's blues were to obviously put the body in for the funerals. So I had to go back down, get my blues, and I spoke to the sergeant major who was in the rear party. And I think by that point, we'd already taken like 82 life-changing casualties. And it was just like, this is a hell of a summer.
What year was that?
2010. And yeah, it was dirty. It was really dirty. And you got to take your hats off to the lads that went straight out of training onto that tour. Because, yeah, they did well. Very well.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shock, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit different when you're taking a fight to the enemy, but when you're kind of sitting ducks and you're trying to take it to the enemy, but you're sort of like almost pinned down because the amount of IEDs that are laced everywhere. It just become a little bit.
Was that your worst enemy then, the IEDs, would you say?
100%. You can be the best soldier in the world, but you can't help what you tread on. Because if you can't see it.
And the people, so say like you said, the valley's the stronghold of the Taliban, and it is just plastered with IEDs. How are they tracking them down? Or is it a fact of like, we'll tread them here and we're not going to walk back down here anyway? Or is there a know-how that they know there's an IED there?
They'd put them in like prominent points where they'd hope a bridge, for example. But we're not thinking of a bridge here. When we're talking about bridges, we're talking about just a little footbridge that's made out of mud and things like that. They'd try and put them underneath them. So if a patrol crossed the bridge, obviously they'd detonate it, whether it was by a command wire, remote control, or victim operated like a pressure plate that you tread on. So obviously what we'd do is the hardest route's the safest route. So we just wouldn't use tracks. We wouldn't use bridges. We wouldn't use vulnerable points. If there was a river, we'd go through it. And just things like that to try and limit and mitigate the IED threat, which you can't always do.
Yeah. And was you ever there when IEDs went off?
Yeah, so I class it as like one of my 3 worst days of my life when we'd gone out. This is towards the end of the tour as well. My troop had taken that many casualties that unfortunately we couldn't sustain our patrol base anymore. So we had a troop relieve us. We went back to the main forward operating base a couple of kilometres further down the, it's called a wadi. It's like a big dried out riverbed. And we went back there. We're about 5 months into the 7-month tour. And we just went out on a routine familiarisation patrol of the Southern Green Zone in Sangin. And we had a patrol go out like the main gate, a patrol go out the back gate, and then we'd sort of crisscross halfway and sort of like come in opposite ways, kind of like a satellite in patrol where there was two patrols on the ground, but we were going to sort of like loop round each other. And we was in a field. I was on a roof with a machine gun covering the lads through the ground that we had just come through. And as they went into a rubberized compound, they hit an IED, and that was the first 3 casualties. But I remember seeing a ladder go flying in the air. We used to carry ladders to go over walls because they're booby-trapped doorways. So that was the safest thing to do, was get ladders over the wall. So we used to carry like light aluminium ladders. And I see this ladder go about 150 foot in the air, and I was just like, someone was carrying that. So we collapsed into this rubberized compound to obviously supporting the medical treatment and the casualty extraction. And I was covering sort of like where it was rubberized, there was a big gap in the wall. So I wanted to cover with my machine gun so the lads could just concentrate on supporting the treatment of the casualties, and then that way they ain't got to look behind them because I'm there. And one of the lads was like, I'm just going to come past you, Twiggy, and try and get us a route out with a metal detector. And then them 2 hit a device next to me. So obviously the overpressure and all the dust and then bits of flesh landing all around you and things like that. And it was just like, we're having a very, very bad day in the office here. So we called for the MERT, which is the Medical Emergency Response Team, which is a Chinook helicopter that comes from Camp Bastion. And they're heroes, they're off the chart, these people. They're like a flying
The knight in shining armor.
Oh
innit?
yeah, when they're coming, you're like, I'm good, because they're like a flying theatre. You know what I mean? The things they were doing, the blokes, they're saving lives. That's what that is, them saving lives. So they work off of, it's called the golden hour. So they guarantee within point of you being hurt, they will have you on the operating theatre in Camp Bastion within an hour, which is a warm and fuzzy that you know they're coming to get you, because they're going to do serious like trauma management to you on the back of that helicopter. And I remember looking over my shoulder and seeing it coming over into the valley. And it was, obviously there's trees everywhere, so I couldn't see it land, but you can see like the dust kick up from the rotors. And then it took off again and flew out the valley. And I was like, oh, we're fucked now. Like, they can't even get us off the ground.
Was this because of gunfight, was it? Or
Well,
just
yeah, because we were
of the
surrounded
mess?
by the Taliban. So we had 5 Cat A casualties. Like, unfortunately, two lads didn't make it. And obviously 3 casualties that needed severe help. And there wasn't that many of us to deal with 5 people, all their kit and equipment, and repel a 360-degree ambush. But we had the other anti-tank lads that were on the roof of, it used to be called the Tower, because it was like the highest building within the forward operating base. They were firing. They had vehicles that they had like got shovels out and built ramps so they could put the suspension up for their guns to fire over the walls, just to do anything to try and give us a bit of breathing space to try and get off of the ground. And yeah, going back to what I said earlier about you need to be with the right people, there's some moments there I remember thinking like we were together that day and it was meant to be, because the rest of us managed to break contact out of a 360-degree ambush and get our casualties back to the FOB and onto the helicopter back to Camp Bastion. But that was a ropey day, very ropey day.
And
But things like that were happening regularly, like to everyone in our area of operations. That wasn't a one-off.
And that was your second Afghan tour, was it?
Yeah, my second kinetic tour where...
Was that your worst tour?
Yeah, because our hands were kind of tied behind our backs. So, I think a lot of people, including myself, to be fair, come home from that quite bitter because things could have been done a lot better. But
Yeah. It's not a football match where you think, okay, we'll dust ourselves off and go again next week. Teammates who were on that football team with you are dead.
Mm.
They're not coming back.
No, that's it.
And
But the thing is you can't even sit there and dwell on it, because you've got to crack on, because otherwise other people are going to die.
Did you make any of your first kills on that tour?
Yeah, a few.
And what did
Especially
that feel
that
like?
day.
And what did that feel like? Do you feel anything from that?
I'm quite black and white. It is what it is. If you're my mate and we're in a nightclub and someone punches you in the mouth, I'm going to punch them. It's no different out there. You shoot at my mate, I'll shoot you. You know what I mean? It's just bigger stakes. So for me, it's part of the job. You know what I mean? No different than anyone else that goes to a job. That's what I'm there to do.
You said to me out there earlier about something like the trauma. You're very desensitized, and you was talking about sticking legs in your bags and stuff. Was that on that?
That
tour?
was on that job, yeah.
Do you want to explain that?
Well, so if you carry the general purpose machine gun, you're the last man in the patrol. You bring up the rear. And when we left that rubberized compound, when we got a tiny bit of breathing space, I didn't want the Taliban to sweep through and see what they had done to my friends. So I did pick up someone's leg and put it in my day sack, just because I didn't want to leave it behind for them to glorify it and then hang it from a tree. Because that's what they started to do. Anything that was left over, kit or limbs or anything like that, they used to tie them to the trees and hang it down, so we used to have to walk past it. But it is what it is. You know what I mean? That's what happened. And I think when you do so much of things like that, you do become desensitized, because that everyone thinks is abnormal becomes normal for you.
Yeah.
Which I personally think is quite a good way to be. because it just means you can get on with your job and nothing's really going to phase you because you've seen so much of it. It's like, my job.
You said that was the third probably worst thing you saw out there. To me, that's life-changing. That's horrific. What were the other two then that, events during your time in the army that really...
So two were later on in my career.
Was any of these during the special unit?
Yeah, so following that tour...
Well, if you want to go into that tour then, maybe, is it?
Yeah, following that tour that I just spoke about, which was Herrick 12 with 40 Commando, I was recommended to go to a specialist military unit that was tri-service with the Parachute Regiment, the RAF Regiment, and they were doing some very good things in Afghanistan, and I was lucky to be a part of that because I got recommended for it. So I joined that unit after I went on my military parachuting course, because to be part of that unit, you had to be a parachutist. I hate heights, but got through it. And they asked for volunteers who wants to go to Afghanistan. I was like, yeah, me. Let's get back
even after the terrible experience you had on that second tour where you came home bitter.
Yeah, it's become personal. I would have stayed out there if I could. You know what I mean? It's personal.
Yeah, and you're not allowed to stay out there
I think there's certain stipulations, like you're not allowed to do back-to-back tours and things like that. But
so is that from all levels as well, commanders, and there's you never got like a soldier who's out there constantly running the show. They swap over and stuff.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Every 6 or 7 months. But they brought a thing in where you couldn't do back-to-back tours, so you couldn't do 6 months at home and then go away again. But there were people that got away with it. I got away with it. I managed to do 5 tours back-to-back.
Wow.
But that 5th one with that specialist military unit was good because it was more intelligence-based. So we were actively manhunting. So if we knew where there was a Taliban stronghold, we'll turn up there at 3 o'clock in the morning on an helicopter and go about our daily business. And I think that was good for me because where I come home bitter and took everything personal, that was kind of like, yeah, this is on our terms now. You've had your time last year. This is our time. You're on the back foot now.
Did you go to the same area? Or?
Funnily enough, I did, yeah. Not funnily enough because it was horrific. The Americans took over from 40 Commando on the tour that I said in 2010. And a year to the month later, I went back into the Sangin Valley with the Americans.
Wow.
And my first patrol with the Americans was through that rubberized compound.
So how big is the Sangin Valley, just to give
it's a big valley, but the Sangin district centre, it's no different than sort of like the local. Say you've got Cardiff, for example, where you're from, and then you've got the outskirts of different Barry and Newport and surrounding areas. It's kind of like that in layman's terms. You've got the Sangin district centre, then further south you'll have Lashkargah, Garmsir, further up north you've got Kajaki.
And these are towns then, are they? Or
yeah,
are
towns.
They small villages? Like, what's the population of these places that you're going into?
Oh, I couldn't tell you because obviously a lot of people would flee.
Yeah.
You'd still have some people there, but sometimes the main district centre within Sangin, on like a market day, you'd see a lot of people buying fruit, veg, goats and things like that. But yeah, they were like towns and cities. That's the best I can explain it, really. But yeah, I ended up going back with the Americans and walking through that rubberized compound where a year to the month previous, we obviously had that horrific day, and I was just like, I'm testing the die here.
Well, lightning don't strike twice normally, but you're putting yourself in a position that it might when you're doing that, aren't you? 5 casualties, two dead. You said,
yeah.
So on that tour, then what were the 2 things that preceded that to be?
Oh, so there was only one on that tour.
Okay.
When we did a helicopter assault force, so we landed in a known Taliban stronghold, but nothing happened. It was quite weird. We call it a trial. It was like, we've not found anything, and we should have. So we was going to extract, but we got a secondary task to go and check out a nearby mountain that had reports of a heavy machine gun nest on it. But to get there was about 2 kilometers of open ground, and it was like a snooker table. So as we left the village that we had assaulted and found nothing, when we've got into the open ground where we've got no cover and nothing to sort of not hide behind, but use to fire back and put between us and the enemy, they just come out the woodwork and smashed us. And we were there for a good while, to the point where people had like rounds pinging in front of them. I had rounds go through my bipod legs on my GPMG. The Special Forces communicator even asked for the medical emergency response team because he was adamant we were going to take casualties, and somehow we didn't. People got shot through the day sacks, the clothing, but nothing actually penetrated anyone's flesh. And someone at Camp Bastion refused to send the helicopters to come and extract us. But because we had radios where we could talk to the aircraft, fair play to the pilots, they were like, we're going to get them.
Yeah,
so
orders.
We basically did a big break contact up this ridge line and over the other side, and then got on the helicopters. But that was like, again, we were getting hit 360, and it was just like, there's no letting up here. Running out of ammunition and stuff like that. And we were so far away from that golden hour and Camp Bastion, because when you work within like certain specialist military units within the Special Forces group, you have dispensation to work outside of that golden hour. So sometimes we'd be 4 hours away from any help.
Oh, mate.
And you're like, there's no ammo getting dropped off anytime soon. We're out on a limb here. But yet again, with the right people. And I keep saying that because it's one of them. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
Yeah. Very true. Have you watched the film? What did you take on like war films and stuff? You a fan of them, or?
Some of them are good.
Probably very critical about some of the modern ones, I imagine.
Can be.
Have you seen The Covenant? Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Is that accurate at all with anything that you saw when you was...
To a certain extent, but they were there solely to hunt IED factories, where we was as well, but we'd go after any stronghold. So it didn't matter whether it was an IED factory or a weapons cache or just a stronghold of people or a target of interest. We was there to react. And ultimately it was like manhunting.
Yeah.
And everything was intelligence. But we closed down quite a few IED factories and drug factories, weapons caches and things like that.
And was there locals who aided that with you? Local soldiers who put their families on the line?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, obviously, the extraction of Afghanistan being so...
abysmal.
Yeah. Yeah, because we had certain units that would stay with us, and obviously they'd roll every 6 or 7 month tour. They'd stay with our friends that would relieve us. So they constantly had the same faces, the same qualities of professionalism coming through each time. And the people that we were working with, they were drug tested. A lot of them were from out of Helmand that travelled in because they wanted to make a difference in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like the Afghan police that chances are his cousin was Taliban and he was smacked up on heroin. These were decent soldiers.
Yeah. Gosh, we could talk for hours on your time out there. But obviously, the time we got, we'll just jump over things quickly. What was your most most memorable, your most favourite kind of mission that you did out in Afghanistan?
Probably the last one I did, actually. We did, so the Americans had kitted out an Afghan army camp with body armour, helmets, night vision, radios, American weapons, ammunition.
Who done that? Sorry, the Taliban?
No, the Americans.
The Americans, sorry.
Gave aid to the Afghans. Army.
Yeah.
And the Taliban overrun them, killed them all, and took all the kit and equipment.
Fuckers.
So we watched them on a drone feed, and they was like zeroing the optic sights on the machine guns and the rifles. They were doing full-on rehearsals. They had machine gun nests on the top of this valley that was one way in, one way out. And there was 115 of them. And we landed on one morning at about 2, 3 in the morning, just into a hail of an 11-hour firefight. Unfortunately, we took 2 casualties before we'd even got on the ground, through people getting shot through the helicopters and things. Unfortunately, we lost an American that was attached to us that hit an improvised explosive device. But we on that day killed 91 of the 115. So that was a good day at the office because they were quite well trained. Obviously had the kit and equipment, and we took most of them out and retrieved a lot of that kit and equipment.
Wow.
So that was a good job to be a part of. And yet again, seeing the heroism of my friends on the ground, just being consummate professionals.
Was that last tour you done there, was it?
I did one tour after in the Middle East.
I was going to jump onto that.
Yeah.
But it was on that second Afghan tour then.
Third Afghan. That was the third Afghan, yeah. So that was a good job to be a part of. And that was kind of the high I come home with of, I had a horrific one in 2010. I'm bitter and twisted. It's personal. And then did another 7 months where it was a bit like, you're on the back foot now.
Yeah.
So that was a good 7 months with some really good people doing some really good stuff. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
So you became part of the 40 Commando. Is that correct? With the Marines?
Yeah, so I went back to 40 Commando from there. And I went to Greece to do a really random task that ended up being, well, the 5 of us out there ended up very involved in the women and children fleeing ISIS in Iraq and Syria.
Refugees, migrants.
But these were the proper ones. These were the ones that were fleeing for their lives with just the clothes out on their back and whatever they could grab.
Women, children.
That's all there was. Not like today where all you see is fighting age males coming over. These were proper war-torn women and children fleeing Iraq and Syria. But where they was making the journey from Turkey into Greece, the stretch of water at the time I was out there was quite rough. So because the people smugglers were like overloading the boats.
Just for that, yeah.
Yeah, just for a bit of money. They'd hit some bad weather because they might set off from Turkey and the weather looks all right, but it can change. And then bit of a swell and then they were capsizing. Unfortunately, a lot of people were drowning. But we were working off of 90 seconds. We were to be off of our boat into the speedboats to react to any boats that had capsized. So we kind of ended up quite involved with CPR on dead children and women that were fleeing. And obviously we tried our best to save everyone. You can't save everyone. But we did save 2,853 people in that 2 months we was out there doing that. But that was quite hands-on.
And was that ever like a frustration to you knowing that this has led from a war zone and this is the direct effect of it?
So where we was, obviously watching that was like the back end of the war where we couldn't do nothing about it. We was there to help people, whereas I wanted to go that way and prosecute the people responsible for what was happening and these innocent women and children dying, which luckily I got to be a part of a couple of years later, where I was part of a special forces task force that went in to the Middle East and took the fight to ISIS to rid them.
When you say Middle East?
Middle East.
Yeah. And is this where your final...
That was my final tour, yeah.
And this is where the explosion happened and stuff, yeah? Would you like to go into that? Because this is obviously very important to where you are now.
Yeah, so my last tour, which was 2018 into 19, I was part of a Special Forces combat liaison team with multinationals and multi-skill sets from different units, all brought together for this task in the Middle East. And we were supporting indigenous forces, sweeping through ISIS positions where they had held in cities and the surrounding towns. And as we got on the back foot, I'd neutralised an ISIS observation post with an anti-tank missile. killing 2 ISIS fighters. And within about 10 or 15 minutes, they returned fire with a American anti-tank missile that they had taken off the Iraqi military. And a couple of my friends were casualties, but lived. Unfortunately, 3 of our partnered forces didn't. And the following day, when we was pulled off the ground because we didn't have enough blokes to support that day's job, a few of us had dizziness, bit unstable on our feet, bit of slurred speech. So we was medevaced back to the UK to have like brain scans, hearing tests, and just generally be looked over because we was hit with American ordnance, even though it wasn't by the Americans, it was made by the Americans that ISIS had got hold of. They wanted to just check us over and make sure that there was nothing going on within our bodies. Unfortunately, an MRI scan showed up that I had something wrong with the front right part of my brain. And that led me into a whole new battle that I wasn't expecting.
Oh, well, first of all, how does that feel knowing it was from an American weapon?
It's just one of them. It's no different than the job we did in Afghan when the Taliban got hold of kit and equipment. You try to support local forces to, obviously at some point, they're going to have to defend their country themselves. So you give them kit and equipment to help them, to give them the best advantage. They get overrun, it ends up in the enemy's hands. There's not a great deal you can really do about that.
No. So what was this battle?
So I had an MRI scan. It showed a problem with the front right lobe of my brain. So people thought to start with it might just be a bleed on the brain or something to do with that blast. So I actually went back into theatre for another 4 weeks, which I don't think people were really happy with, but it's where I wanted to be with the lads. So I did another month on the ground, not knowing what was going to come. And on my R&R, I was diverted to fly from Heathrow to fly to Birmingham, where the hospital is that we go to meet a consultant who took me in for another MRI scan. And then I was allowed on my leave. And then 12 days later, the night before I was due to fly back out to finish the last part of the tour, I got a phone call and was told that I needed to be at Birmingham Hospital at 8 o'clock the following morning and don't drive. So I was like, well, I'm flying tomorrow from Heathrow back into theatre. And she was like, you're not. You're going to be here at 8 in the morning. You ain't going to drive. I was like, sounds a bit serious. So my mum drove me up to Birmingham Hospital the following morning. And it was a bit weird because it was like I was like a celebrity. I was greeted by people in white overcoats and suits and clipboards, and I was taken in for an MRI scan again, but with contrast, like where they put the dye in you. Then from there, I was like ushered to the other side of the hospital, where I went into a room and there was like a hollow square of people sat around. Yet again, clipboard suits and all that. Yeah, come in. And I remember as I walked in, I said, well, this don't look fucking good. And they sat me down and told me that I had a brain tumour. So I didn't really know what a brain tumour was. I was like, all right. Excuse my ignorance. I don't really know what that means. They were like, you need an emergency craniotomy, like brain surgery to cut it out. I was like, all right, we'll do it in a couple of months when I've got a month off because I'm flying in the theatre later. And they were like, you ain't going nowhere. I was like, I am. I'm booked on a flight later, so we'll do this in a couple of months when I'm home. So the last thing I wanted to do was leave the lads out in theatre, you know what I mean? Like, I want to be with them. But they wouldn't have none of it, so I got downgraded, and that was the end of my tour. So I had the emergency brain surgery where they cut out the tumour that was in the front right lobe of my brain. And I was on a ward, but there's a really good charity up in Birmingham called Fisher House. And it's like a welfare house. I think it costs like £18 million. And it's got multiple bedrooms, and it's for injured families. So when lads are obviously coming home from war, unfortunately losing limbs and been shot or whatever, when they're on the wards, they have this house for the families so they can cook themselves food, stay away from everything, but are close enough to just walk over to the wards and see their loved ones. Brilliant place. Obviously, at this time, the country wasn't really at war. There was no Afghan anymore on the scale that it was in years previous. So there wasn't many casualties coming home from kinetic warfare, because the only stuff that was going on was the discrete stuff that the Special Forces group was taking part in. And when we come home, there were spare rooms. So they let me have one. So I could go in, have my operation, but have like my own room away from being on a ward, which is just nicer. You know what I mean? Telly on the wall, Sky and things like that. It just made the whole ordeal a little bit more swallowable. So I was in there for a week, and then I was given an appointment where I had to go and see the consultant again. So I went in, and yet again, the whole hollow square thing. And I went in, and it's weird because they try and do it all softly, like cuddly, wrap you up in cotton wool, and I don't really like that. Kind of annoys me more than just telling me the truth. So I was like, look, I'm a big boy. Just tell me straight. And they broke the news to me that I had the most aggressive form of cancer, and I had 12 to 15 months to live, which is a bit random because I'd gone from the pinnacle of my career, out on operations, doing some really good things, to not even a month later getting told that I probably won't live another year. And I was a bit like, can't be right. So I went through a 9-month prolonging life phase where I had double chemotherapy and maximum radiotherapy. And then at the end of that, in the December, I pretty much got a handshake and told, you're on your own now. I was like, yeah, happy days. And I'm still here now talking to you. And on March the 20th, I'll make it into the top 3% of survivors in the world at my 5-year point. So I'm like 43 months past my sell-by date.
Man.
And then I'm going to go to 10 years to be in the 1%. And then I need to get the 21 years to be the only longest serving survivor.
Well, I think that's if anyone wants to question or wonder how you've done this, just listen to what you just said. Then it's clear that your attitude towards it is, this is not going to beat you.
You can't take a backward step. You can take one to the left or the right, but you've got to keep going forward. Can't go backwards.
And when you was told this, was this your thought process then as well? Or is this something that you've kind of built along the way?
Well, it's never over till it's over. Just because you tell me something, it don't mean I'm going to listen to you. You know what I mean? If I can find my own way of winning, I will. So it was a bit like, you're going to die next year. No, I'm not. Yeah, you're going to die next year, mate. I'm not. But it's funny because back then they thought I was in denial. So they got a few character references from people that were very close to me. And obviously the lads in the unit were like, oh no, he literally doesn't give a fuck. Like, put something in front of him and he'll have a go with it. So they didn't push me down the mental health road through the denial side of things. And it's funny because all this time, I still get scanned regularly. But I go up there and it's a bit of like banter now because the consultants and that have almost become my friends. And I'm like, told you I'd still be here. I'm like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. So that's it now. So what I want to do is sort of like...
Have they said, look, just, we're expecting it any moment now, or have they turned it round? They changed their tone?
The thing is that the cancer I've got so far advanced, there's still no cure or anything like that. So no matter what happens, I'm terminally ill with cancer, which can obviously affect job prospects and things like that. But I don't have any treatment anymore. The only treatment I've got is a positive attitude, and we'll keep fighting until I'm in the ground, whenever that may be.
So, yeah. So if anyone was going through this, what advice would you give? Probably stating the obvious, but...
I mean, I was lucky because I've got a supportive family and very, very good friends around me, which that always helps. But at the same time, even if you're alone and your support network's not that good, that wins everything. What's in your head will determine how you feel. If you wake up in the morning and feel sorry for yourself, lay on the sofa, well, you've given up. Like, small victories, that's what I used to do. I'd go in for chemo, and because I was like living in the hospital in that Fisher house, I had a swipe card for the staff gym with all the nurses and that. So on my way back from treatment, I'd go into the gym. I weren't breaking no records because I was ill. I looked like I was going to die. But in my head, I was like, if I do 20 minutes on a spin bike, that's 20 more minutes than probably most people that are terminally or going through chemo are doing. So in my head, I'm like, I'm gaining ground. You know what I mean? I'm putting one foot in front of the other, and that's positives in a massive negative. And then I went back to work. I carried on working through the last bit of my chemo. And yeah, just cracked on. It's never over till it's over.
Yeah. And do you get these thoughts in your mind that today could be the day, or is there no time for that in this state of positivity?
Every now and again, if I've got a headache, for example, I'll be like, here we go. What's happening? But that could be dehydration. So straight away, I'll tell myself, just go and drink some water. You ain't dead yet. You know what I mean? I'll worry about it when they tell me, right, you're fucked again. You know what I mean? But yeah, when you have an headache, you're a bit like, oh no, that ain't good. Because I had no symptoms before. And I was told that should have headaches, dizziness, things like that. So if I get that, I'm like, oh dear. But then 10 minutes later, I'm like, I've drunk a bit of water, and I'm like, stop being pathetic, you're all right. And then we crack on again. So I don't let it get me down for too long. If it gets me down, I quickly have a word with myself. And
I think your attitude towards this is the same attitude that we need to put towards not just mental well-being and maybe diagnosis. It's the attitude you have as a whole package that we need to go forward in life right now, because we're living in a time that it's bizarre. Personally, I think. Yeah. We've never lived in a time like this before. What is your take on how things are in the world at the moment?
I think not necessarily the world, but certain parts of the Western world have become very pink and fluffy and very soft. And that doesn't really get you anywhere, in my opinion.
Easy times create hard men. It's the reverse.
Easy times create soft men. Hard times create hard men. Is it saying it along them lines? Yeah. I get where you're coming from, but the bigger picture is that you need. Obviously, I'm always going to talk from sort of like a military point of view. You need a military that is rough and ready to deliver extreme acts of violence at a moment's notice, because there are bad people in the world. And it doesn't matter that we're in 2023, nearly 2024, with all this technology and everyone wants to hug each other and that. There are enemies out there. And that is it. There will, as long as there's mankind, there will be wars. And we need to be ready for that. We need to stop diluting the modern day society with all this, oh yeah, it's fine to be offended, and yeah, you can have your safe spaces and that. Like, I remember being at school and it was like that, sticks and stones will break my bones. You know what I mean?
Words can never hurt me.
And it's like that. Now all of a sudden you say one wrong word and
cancel. You're
like that. Hey, what's going on here? And I think that obviously
words do hurt me on a t-shirt and I like.
Yeah. Like, and that obviously people now talk about anxiety, which is definitely a real thing. Depression's definitely a real thing. They're all real things, but it's spiking at a rapid rate of knots. And I generally think it's because people don't just get to, oh, mate, have a day off, like grab your bollocks and just move forward.
So I'm someone who's very like, I think we should talk about things, problems. Like you talking about this now is unbelievable. And I'm sure it can help people, more people than you'll ever know. But I do think there is there has to be a roof on that. There has to be a plug for that where, where does it stop otherwise, There has to be, right, you're being silly now.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, it's just, yeah, the West. When you say the West, what parts do you mean?
Us, America. You see it all over social media now. You know what I mean? There's always people moaning and crying about something. And I've obviously travelled all over the world, the Middle East, Africa. I've been to some really poverty-stricken places. And then people that don't have iPhones, don't have trainers to play football in, don't have a lot of food, they're happy. You know what I mean? And then you get people over here that are spoiled that are now, oh, well, he said something that offended me, or he called me a man and I'm a woman. Mate, you're 6 foot tall with an Adam's apple and a beard. What do you think people are going to call you? You're all of that. So it's just gone so
People
stuff.
are getting offended by being misgendered. I work in services, and like I said, so what happens if like someone who works in that drug service, is a trans, but that person who's going to pick up his methadone, let's say, he ain't thinking about how shall I like pronounce this person, and if people want to be called what they want, whatever, but don't expect for me to. I should have my own free will to be able to say what I want, and I think over here it's got to a point now where people are too scared to talk up because they lose jobs.
Yeah,
it's got to that stage.
100%, it's got to that point. 100%. That is exactly where we're at now, where people are scared to say anything, even if it's the right thing to say, because of the backlash of people giving it the "I'm offended, you need to be mindful of my feelings."
Are you worried about our future?
No.
Not you as an hard bastard. I mean, just in general. Like, I know you're not worried, but like, I
just think it will go full circle.
Yeah,
because we're going so stupid now.
It'll go tough again.
But it will get to the point of people going like, enough is enough now. Like, wind it in, because it is off the chart now.
You remember the Reverend Calvin saying about how you haven't seen the far right yet?
No.
The response, like people are being offended by people saying that, but they haven't actually felt it yet. You know what I mean?
But the thing is everyone now is classed as far right extremists if you don't agree with whatever agenda's going on at the moment.
Well, I think the thing that upsetted me the most was, if you want to talk about it, feel free. The cenotaph. So of course there was veterans going there, but also obviously Tommy Robinson and a few of their lads wanted to go down just to show support, which I think is great. And they, Sky News, they label them all far-right racists. Mm-hmm. Football hooligan, far-right racists.
But the media is a massive part in all of this problem. Because if you look at football hooligans from way back in the day, from the late 70s all the way up till now, where there is actual hatred between football firms, in recent years they've started coming together on certain occasions to say, look, we've got a bigger problem than football. And it's unfair to straight away class a bloke that goes to football who's a white patriotic man in his own country who wants to go and pay his respects to fallen soldiers that gave their lives for the freedom of this country.
For him to be able to go watch a football on a weekend.
For him to be labelled as a far right-wing racist thug.
Even though, we all fought against Nazis and Hitler and totally disagree with that bullshit. There's going to be dickheads
you're always
everywhere.
Going to get that. You're always going to get that. You're always going to.
Well, they're going to add fuel to that, and they're going to jump on that. They're only going to film that bit. Yeah, 100%. And there are people who are just angry about it anyway. There are people who will jump on that.
Yeah, of course.
But
the media will only see what they want to see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you look at all the troubles in London over the last couple of years with all the different marches that have gone on from different organisations, or supposed organisations, there's always violence. But it's very rare to see, bearing in mind all these football hooligans that are together, football hooligans, because not all of them are, have all come together to show their respect. Well, they hate each other, but there's no violence. But you've picked up on maybe 4 blokes having a can of Stella and getting a bit rowdy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, why aren't you portraying other people like that?
No, you're very right in what you're saying, and for you to say that as well, like you're just someone who's fought for your country. You can see it. You can see it for what it is. Another thing I picked up on earlier on is when you was talking about the crossing the Mediterranean and the boats toppling over and stuff, and you said they wasn't fighting age men. This is something that's people are talking about on a serious level now, where they're concerned about this. What's your take on it?
So I think a lot of people that talk about it don't actually know what they're going on about. So if you look at a refugee is someone who flees a country of war. So we'll use Iraq and Syria, for example. So anyone fleeing northern Syria, they get into Turkey, they're a refugee. They've hit a safe space where Turkey's not at war.
Taking refuge.
There you go, you're a refugee. As soon as you then go to Greece, into Europe and cross 6 or 7 borders, you're not a refugee anymore. You're an economic migrant that's looking for a benefit system.
Yeah.
Because if you was a refugee, you would have been happy to be out of your war-torn country at the first safe moment.
You're looking for preference now.
Yeah.
You're looking for, I heard UK's the best.
Exactly.
You know?
And that's exactly how it goes. But I mean, when I was dealing with the boats in the Aegean Sea, they were all women and children. They were refugees in trouble. You look at it now, and I see things on the news and that they're all fighting age males with iPhones taking selfies and that, like laughing because they've managed to get here because they know they're going to get a free meal ticket. And yet again, people get called racist and right wing and things like that, but it puts a strain on our NHS. It puts a strain on housing, and it's like that. They're not refugees by the time they get here. You know what I mean? They was a refugee 7 countries ago. And it's just one of them things, but yeah, they're just my opinions. I'm probably a right-wing, far-right, hooligan, Nazi, something, you know what I mean, for saying my opinion. Well, I've probably offended someone.
British Army, just in general, do you still think we're capable to defend ourselves amongst the top other armies in the world?
I think we're on the limits of becoming not as effective as we think we are, because the focus is, everything's changed. From what I hear, I'm not in anymore, am I? But obviously you've still got outstanding people in the SAS, the SBS, the whole special forces community, the Marines, the paras, the infantry. Like I'd like to think we'll always have that like bulldog spirit of we're the United Kingdom and that's why we're Great Britain. You know what I mean? And you're always going to have the Welsh, the Scottish, obviously the fucking Northern Irish and the English lads all come together for that military. It's not a problem with the lads. It's a problem with certain agendas that are being pushed out that are creeping into them sort of occupations that they probably shouldn't be. The same as the fire service, the police, the NHS. You know what I mean? All the government organisations should be, right, we've got to focus here, and it's, if you're a paramedic, saving lives. If you're in the military, defend your country. If you're in the police, stop crime. Whereas even that's becoming an issue now because what people are labelled as.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, my opinion.
Yeah, but this is your interview. Is there any places since, a man who has been, 15 years in the military, these obviously wars that have been happening recently, is there any of these you felt like, oh, I wish I went there, or I wish I'd done some good here, or I'd have a bit of that?
I think I've been to most of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking anything that I'd like to be a part of. I didn't like the Russian invasion in the Ukraine.
Do you want to touch on that?
That's not really. That's not really. Just as
You didn't like it from the Russian perspective.
No, I just think it's a bit moody when if you're going to have a war, at least not be. You can't be targeting hospitals and innocent people. You know what I mean? Obviously, collateral damage, unfortunately, in a time of war, people will get caught in the crossfire. But you can't just actively target civilian infrastructure like building. And I did go out there for a little bit, doing some advising. I was in a place called Kharkiv, which is the closest city to the Russian border. And all the tower blocks were obliterated. And there was like kids' teddies and books, and you're like, that. If you want to have a fight, go army to army. You know what I mean? That's how I see it. But obviously, there are going to be times people get caught up in it, which is unfortunate. But yeah, you can't just target people's like residents and schools and hospitals and things like that. It really.
Yeah, no, it's very sad, and we're in a time now where it is very, very worrying, paranoid times. A lot of people are in. You'd think this would be a time where people would wake up and kind of smell the coffee a bit, but you know, are we walking into a grave here, especially in the UK? I don't know. One thing I want to ask you is, obviously, for someone who has let's say you're past your sell by date by 4 or 5 years, let's say, someone who could drop dead at any minute, let's say, probably we all could, but other people's attitudes could be like, fuck the world, fuck this, fuck that, I'm going out with a bang, or I'm doing this and I'm going to be a cunt. That's not you though. And that's
I don't think until you've been put in that position, you can ever really comment on that, because people said it to me, go and get a load of loans out and just lord it. You know what I mean? Just get yourself in debt and then it won't matter because you'll die. Well, that was never an option for me because I didn't intend on giving up. If I went and got a load of loans out and went and spunked it on the piss,
you probably fucking keel over and died just from the thought
that just weren't the angle that I was willing to take, you know what I mean? Because I've accepted defeat then. I'm going to die. I might as well max out a load of credit cards. Pointless. You know what I mean?
You've got to live it like that ain't even a conversation.
That ain't happening. You know what I mean? Because you've given up. You've admitted I'm going to die, so I might as well spunk a load of money. So even though, yeah, all right, you'll have a load of money, well, I'd be sat here like that. Yeah, I'm nearly 5 years in, 3% in the world, but I owe 60 grand to HSBC and it's not going to achieve nothing.
Is there any mottos that you live your life by?
No surrender. Simply because I ain't going to give up on nothing. Works for me.
So any other future plans alongside the obvious 10-year milestone? And
so I do a little bit of advising here and there across Africa, which I like because it keeps my brain active and stuff like that. I enjoy that. So I'll do that for as long as I can, when I can, because it's not always there. It comes up every now and again. But the end state is to, what I'd really like to do is when I sort of like slow down, stop taking opportunities to go away, is off the back of my book, try and get into motivational speaking and try and help people with poor mental health or anyone that's suffered a bad, like a cancer prognosis, for example, just to show them that it ain't over till it's over. You know what I mean? Try and kick someone up the arse and go, yeah, he's right. I'm going to do this. I ain't going to lay down and take the 6 months that I've got or the 2 years that I've been given and try and change cancer statistics.
I think you'll do that without you even trying, mate, to be honest, because this is self-explanatory and your story is so powerful without you even having to make those networking efforts. I do a lot of public speaking through the journey of addiction, motivational speaking through that, really, of saying, you know, there's more to life. And if I could get you some good connections in the prisons and stuff like that if you want.
Yeah, it'd be very appreciated.
Yeah, well, mate, honestly, I think it's unbelievable, mate, and you've really inspired me through this.
Thank you.
What we do with all our guests, is we like to get them to kind of look down the camera and speak to the people at home who will see this. If there's anything that maybe you felt you haven't said, or a positive message, maybe someone who's going through the same thing as you, maybe. If you could give it to them down that camera.
Yeah, whatever you're facing, no matter how bad it is, any hurdle can be overcome with the right mindset and positive aggression. Never give up. No surrender.
I like it, mate. Honestly.
Thank you very much for having me on.
No, mate, honestly, really, really enjoyed this. It was a great way to finish. Yeah, guys, please go check out his book, No Surrender, Every Day is a Battle by Rian Illett. Where can they get this?
It's on Amazon, mate.
Amazon, yeah? Okay. And are you on any social media or anything for the
I'm
people
on
as well?
Instagram as Twiggy1664.
Twiggy. Where did that nickname come from?
Because when I passed out of commando training, I was under the required weight to join.
He was a twig.
My last name's Illett, so I got nicknamed Twiglet.
Twiglet, yeah.
And then when I got to a unit, it was Twiggy.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's mad because my uncle Bill's brother-in-law, his name's Twiggy, and you look a bit like him with a beard. I'm not even joking. I'll send you a picture. Yeah, no, guys, please, if you know, there's photos, there's everything in here. There's over 200 pages.
I did that myself. Just
Did
sat
you?
on the kitchen table.
No way.
Yeah, and then just self-published on Amazon. Didn't have a ghostwriter or anything, just cuffed it myself through COVID.
Unbelievable. So this is as raw as it gets.
Yeah, that's it. The only thing I had is because I wasn't the greatest at school, was once I had my manuscript and the
Someone to read
Special
over.
Forces Disclosure Cell signed it off that I could release it. I had an editor go through it with a tooth comb to put commas and punctuation in the right place. But yeah, I did that on
Check him
on my
out there. Look how handsome he was. You'll have to put that on the screen. I'll send you it. Yeah, no, honestly, thank you so much for coming. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If any of you want to reach out to Rian, maybe, you know, questions or, you know, even if anyone wants to take him for some motivational speaking, maybe someone will have him, I'm sure. Go check him out on social media. It is
Twiggy 1664.
There we go. And on Amazon, get his book. There it is. All right. And until next time, guys, stay central.
The Central Club.